All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Elise Salisbury, Deputy Director at Sister Reach. It's a reproductive justice based here in Memphis, Tennessee, founded by our own CEO, Cherie Scott. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our Social Justice Preacher Series. Our topic is traditional churches in Millennial Times. This month, our special guest is the one and only Dr. Judy Altson. Dr. Altson holds the rank of professor in the Department of Doctoral Studies and Advanced Programs at Ashland University. Her research includes gender and educational leadership with a focus on Black female school superintendents, urban education and educational leadership, highlighting administrative reform in urban schools, and diversity in educational leadership, exploring how the intersections of class, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual diversity, and ability affect leaders. She is the author of numerous articles and book chapters. She is the author of Multi-Leadership in Urban Schools and the co-author of the 7th, 8th, 9th, and upcoming 10th edition of the best-selling textbook, School Leadership and Administration, Important Concepts, Case Studies, and Simulations, as well as co-authors of her stories, Leading the Lessons of the Lives of Black Women Activists. So I introduce to some, as we say, and present to others, the one and only Dr. Judy Altson. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're glad to have you. Thank you so much. And I am anticipating hearing your lecture or your sermon on today.
Thank you. It is good to be here. I'm excited. I'm not formally preaching today, but it may end up being a sermon in some way, shape, or form. Who knows? But it's good to be here. Thank you. Excited.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited to hear you, and you got the floor. We're here to hear your wisdom, your knowledge, and your wisdom.
All right. Well, let's get it started, if we will. So when you first reached out to me to do this, and I looked at the list, I was like, what can I talk about? That sounds interesting, and that one sounds interesting. But then the Spirit just led me to the topic that I chose, which is the traditional church in Millennial Times. And that's, look where we are right now. I mean, we can say a whole lot without mentioning the C word, right? But there's a lot going on. But the Spirit didn't say preach a sermon. The Spirit said, do what I've told you to do, what I've gifted you to do, which is talk about leadership. Because in the midst of everything that's going on, leadership is the thing that holds the key for us. Church, inside church and outside of church. So I'm going to share this with you guys, and we'll just kind of chat it up about it. So the subtitle for today's topic is the need for and value of catalytic leadership. So traditional churches in Millennial Times, the need for and value of catalytic leadership. Now, what do I mean? What am I talking about here? When I went and did the research, because that's what I do, I'm a researcher, I had to go pull some data. And right now, church is tough, but that ain't nothing new. Church has been tough for years. When I think back when I was a little kid, church was tough, but from a different perspective because of the mindset and the age and the lack of maturity. But now we're looking at what Ferguson, one researcher, Ferguson, says that church is tough, and Christians realize that a large reason why people leave the church is that they are unwilling to deal with the messiness of the church, right? Because church is messy. We just gonna tell the truth today. There's some messiness in church because there's the spiritual side and there's the business side, right? So when I looked at some further research, there's a Gallup poll that says that although the United States is one of the more religious countries in the world, particularly among Western nations, it is far less religious than it used to be. and barely 3/4 of Americans now identify with a religion, and only about half claim membership in a church, a synagogue, or a mosque. So times have changed, but yet times have remained the same. We now have access to getting the details in terms of data much more quickly than we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So I did a little bit more research, and I found on this slide here, you see the major church trends in 2020. And this came out actually at the end of 2019 from this website called Reach Right Studios. And I found this to be fascinating. There were more things that he listed, but that first one, less flash and more personal worship. Wow. And we're seeing the effects of that right now with what's going on. I'm truly trying not to mention the C word, but it probably will end up going. I might as well go ahead and say COVID-19. That a lot of churches are not meeting, not necessarily because they can't do it online. It's just that it's not the party anymore. It's not the flashiness. I can't stand up in the pulpit and do a show.
Wow.
Right? And people really are in search of this need for personal worship.
Yes.
Right? And my pastor at South Euclid United Church of Christ, Reverend Courtney Clayton Jenkins, I always give her a shout out because she always gives great nuggets. But she was doing this series on unhindered worship recently, and she said that worship is simply this. This is the definition of worship: my deep, abiding love expressed toward God for first loving me. My deep, abiding love expressed toward God for first loving me. And what does the word say? You got to love the Lord your God first, and then you love your neighbor as yourself. So we are looking for this notion of personal, yet also corporate worship. Absolutely. We don't need all the flash in the pan. It's about this relationship, right? People experience your church online first. We're in an online era. It's not going anywhere. So we might as well get over that, right? The online presence has got to evolve. And if you become more personal and relational as the leader in the church with those inside the church and outside of the church, you can find the gifts from the people that will allow your presence to evolve online and offline. Then this notion of improving the culture or moving out. Now, culture changes is very difficult because the culture has been set in motion for a long time. So you can change climate pretty quickly. Like in your house, you can change the climate by hitting the thermostat and changing it, and it can warm up or cool down. You can do that in the organization relatively quickly by doing some things that are attentive to the needs. But changing a culture requires a different set of abilities and gifts, and it takes time. Absolutely. The other thing that they say is they got to be ready to have conversations. See, we don't want to talk about nothing, right? We don't want to talk about nothing. And there is so much going on in the world. There's so much going on in our lives. We just need to get real and have some real conversations. You can't talk to me about showing up to church and tithing, et cetera, if I'm not getting my basic needs met at home. Absolutely. Yeah, if we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're not dealing with my food and shelter, I'm not hearing you for anything else. Right? We got to take time for personal touches. Again, that goes back to the idea of relationships. To me, leadership is about relationship. And that helps you to stay in contact with the entire community, not just the people that are in the pews or in the seats in your building, but where is that building? What is the community that surrounds that building? And then we also have to embrace more interactive church services. Now, Black folk, I'm gonna talk to Black folk right now. We know about interactive church service because we do call and response really well. So we are interactive. Here's the kicker though. we only want particular interaction in that way, right? We want to be able to stand up and shout and dance and run and do all those things, but we don't want your child running around. We don't want to hear that, you know, we don't want you coming in from the outside with a different type of interaction that we're not quite comfortable with. But we got to embrace the largeness of the interactivity that needs to happen in our spaces. Because the other piece to this is that there are so many generations represented in a church, right? There's a book about the Perfect Human Capital Storm. And he says in that book that we are in a society where organizations now have about 6 generations working in one organization. That's no different in the church. You have people who are 90 all the way down to babies and everything in between. So how do you engage that entire spectrum of being? And that and when you know we get really deep with hymns, folk love, and I'm a hymner. I love me some hymns. Y'all know I love hymns, but we've got to make space for other types of music, other genres of music in the church at the same time without getting rid of that. All of those things have a place. All of those genres have a place in the church if we're going to embrace this interactivity and this relationship that we seek. So those are some of the trends that he talks about. The question is, what do we do? What do we do? You know, we asking that right now. What do we do? This Sunday morning, what am I doing? I'm so used to getting up and going to church. I'm either going to 6 or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock service. I don't understand why people get up that early, but you know, do you? 7 o'clock service, 8 o'clock service, 10 o'clock service, 11 o'clock service, and we have been interrupted. So what do? It's a paradigm shift, right? And that's something we don't like to talk about. Because we don't like change. We don't want to move. So I'm suggesting that in this paradigm shift, in this time that we have, there are 4 things that we have to do. We've got to rethink in the traditional church. We've got to reimagine. We have to reinvent. And by God, we're going to have to change, right? That's the ugliest cuss word in any organization. I don't want to, well, we got to change. If you're going to grow and reach the masses, look at him saying, how to reach the masses, men of everybody. How you going to reach the masses if you don't change, okay? So given that as the backdrop, I was doing some work and I was looking at where the Spirit was leading me. And the Spirit led me right to some stuff that I had written before or referenced before and written about. But this notion of being a catalyst leader. And this is the book of the work of Bill Lomenick in his book, The Catalyst Leader. That catalyst leader is that red ball that makes the rest of the dominoes move. You know, we gotta do some change. And that's the thing that people, again, don't want, but that's what we need in the so-called traditional church right now. We need a catalyst leader. We need somebody who's going to ignite change. We got to have somebody who's going to help us set a new direction. Because if you keep doing the same thing that you've always done, expecting a different result, we all know that that's the definition of insanity, right? We need insight and action to get to where God really wants us to be going. And that means it's got to change. And so when I think about this, I always make sure that I ground my work in the work of our ancestors, because we didn't get here by ourselves. The other thing is there's nothing new under the sun. The question is, are we opening up our eyes to recognize what's going on and reaching back to use what our ancestors have laid out before us? And Shirley Chisholm said it the best way that I know how. I am and always will be a catalyst for change. I'm not going to sit here and just accept the status quo. She didn't do that. And I, as a Black woman in this current century, can't continue to accept the status quo either. I too am going to be a catalyst for change. So when we say change, oh no, we don't want to change. In his book, the Catalyst Leader, Lomenick, talks about this idea of being the change agent and how difficult it can be. Change interferes with our autonomy. I don't have no control. It's mine. I'm in control. I started this church, or I started this organization. And even though I've been sitting here for 50 years, I still want it to work just like it did 50 years ago. No, ma'am, no, sir. It can't be. It just can't be. Change feels like walking off a cliff blindfolded, right? Because and people reject that. They don't want that. I need to see where I'm going. But you're not always going to see where we're going, right? Nobody saw what was coming to us the last couple of months. Well, maybe somebody did, and they just didn't tell nobody, but I'm going to leave that right there. Then it's the whole notion of surprise. Now, I'm old enough to remember watching Gomer Pyle, because that was one of my favorite shows. And it was always surprise, surprise, surprise. Some people don't like surprise. They don't like surprises. They don't like being caught off guard. But guess what? That's life. There's no certainty in life. The only certainty is that we're going to die. We all are going to die. That's for certain. But you've got to learn to embrace the surprises. Sometimes the surprises will take you to places that you could have never even imagined. We're creatures of habit. And change tends to jolt into our consciousness, and sometimes some very uncomfortable ways. But in order to grow, you got to change. People always say when you were growing up and your body was growing, it was not comfortable, right? If you had a growth spurt, that thing hurt. Bones growing, muscles moving, that hurts. But that's all to get to a better place. The concerns about competence, when people feel inept or stupid, they resist change. That's just real talk. I don't know anything about it, therefore it can't be good. Well, you've got to open yourself up to some education around what's going on and how it can be better, because it's not about you, it's about the larger organization. Change creates ripples that can disrupt. Again, because we're so used to doing things in a particular way, we don't want to see change. And sometimes it's about those past resentments, and sometimes it's a real threat for people. So that the stages of change, that this is all theoretical stuff, but shock, resist, acceptance, support, and commitment. And while it's a cute little figure and it's very linear in the figure, it's not so much linear in life. And as the leader of an organization, and particularly in a church, we've got to be able to walk through these stages with the followers. We've got to sit with them in their shock. We got to sit with them in their grief, in their acceptance, and because it's not going to be a neat and tidy thing that happens. It looks neat and tidy, but it's just like the grieving process. It ain't a neat and tidy process. So one of the 7 deadly words in an organization in the church, we've always done it this way, but look where we are right now. What if we have to do it this way? Change. And you can't always be ready for the change. I mean, we could not have necessarily prepared for what's going on right now, but if you were open to what's going on and open to bringing in other people to help you think differently, then you get the picture on the right. Okay, so I can be here on a Sunday and I can put up all the pictures of my congregants and feel their presence somehow here and to feel their spirit. So quickly, as we will get through this, Lomenick says there are 8 essentials for this notion of catalytic leadership. And I'm going to run through these, each of them: being called, being authentic, passionate, capable, courageous, principled, hopeful, and being collaborative. When you're called, you got to find your uniqueness, right? Everybody who, a lot of people want to, and I'm just, this going to be church specific. A lot of people look at what the preacher does on Sunday. I didn't say the pastor, what the preacher does on Sunday and thinks, oh, that looks like I could do that. Yeah, but were you called to do that? What's your call? What's your sense of calling? What is the thing that you know that you hear from God saying that you have to do in order to be fulfilled in this life? You've got to find your uniqueness as a catalytic leader will do that. You have to choose integrity over immediacy, right? And I know we're in a time of immediate gratification, but that ain't always good for you. So what is it about having some integrity versus having this thing right now in the moment? The second thing is, and this one always gets me, it's about being authentic, unleashing the real you. In that first bullet, in the new economy of leadership, authenticity rises to the top. The question is, who are you? And if you don't know, then you need to go and sit with yourself, sit with the Holy Spirit, and get to know who you are. Because you can't be the best leader that you can be if you don't know. How authentic is your organization going to be if you're not an authentic leader? They go hand in hand. Brene Brown, who I love, wrote in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about how the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. And so how do you create that? How do you cultivate that authenticity? The first question you ask, or the second question after you ask, who am I? The other question is, whose attention am I craving? Because if you're craving somebody else's attention, then you're going to make yourself into the image and likeness that they want you to be, and you won't be authentic. And then if you're doing that, and that means you're not leading the church in an authentic way to be an authentic organization, to be what God is calling that space to be. Right? Are you constantly having your representative show up? Or you have a representative that shows up in the pulpit, you have a representative that shows up in the board meeting, you have a representative that shows up in the committee meeting, a representative that shows up out in public, on the TV, in your family, on social media, as this third one says. Did you create an alter ego on, because people get real bold on social media now. But it's about being transparent, intimate, and honest simultaneously. This is all at the same time. This is not a if, either or. This is a both and. You got to learn to laugh at yourself. And that last bullet point, you got to be interested instead of being interesting. Be interested over interesting. In other words, this is not about you. Keep saying that. If you are fulfilling the purpose in your life, then you know this is not about you. I could stop right there, but I'm gonna trudge on. You got to get some balance with this authenticity, and evaluate your authenticity. Be discerning. There goes that word that we love in the church: discernment. The ability to see things for what they really are and not for what you want them to be. Right? In discernment, the Greek word is dokimazo, and it means to. It's a type of test which separates the good from the bad. It's salvaging the good and discarding the useless. So you got to figure out that whole notion of discernment. Jesus didn't run around blurting everything that was true. He just didn't do that. While he was never deceitful, but sometimes Jesus intentionally withheld truth because he knew that the audience wasn't ready to hear it. They weren't ready to hear it. He knew when to speak a harsh rebuke and when to be silent. Discernment. It's part of being a catalytic leader. You got to be passionate. Live in the pursuit of God. Whatever you're doing, you've got to have that passion for, because that passion is infectious. And that doesn't mean that every day is a happy day. But at the end of the day, you can say, I am in it to win it because I'm fulfilling the purpose for which God has created me. Therefore, that passion never dies. Now, I might get tired physically, but that internal passion, it continues to fuel me and make sure that I get up and go and do this thing every day. You got to be capable. You're making excellence a non-negotiable. I love that. Being a capable leader is not about being big or expensive. It's about being excellent. I love the way Lomenick puts this stuff. Excellence is built on 3 pillars: clarity, focus, and connection. That goes back to relationship. This is a spirit. It's not a presentation. Again, we're not standing up giving you a show on Sunday, because when you can't give the show, what you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Then we have the being courageous. You got to be prepared to jump, but you got to take the appropriate risk. You don't jump at everything. Again, that goes back to discernment. This is what I've said about preparing to jump, that third bullet point. You got to move from your comfort zone to the learning edge and have the faith that if you step over the cliff, that God is going to catch you and lead you into your destiny so that you can fulfill your purpose. So you're not just falling over the cliff unthinking. No, I'm falling over into the arms of my Lord and Savior. I'm falling over into the hands of God, because I know that the Lord is going to catch me and take me to the place where I need to go. But I had to be willing to take that first step. Leadership is about taking risks, making mistakes, and learning from those mistakes. And that last line always gets me, even though I wrote it, I was having a moment back in 2002. When leadership is right, people are inspired to do their best. Whatever the best that they have to give, when that leadership is right, they're going to roll with you. They'll roll with you to the very end. You have to build a culture of courage. And that's a whole nother conversation we could have. But again, it's about building a culture, not just changing the climate. And that means that you have some responsibilities as the leader in that building of a culture. You can't do everything. You gotta learn to delegate. You gotta learn to create a great team around you, so that everything then is about the larger mission and vision of the organization. You got to be anchored in your convictions. Your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. The solid rock of your convictions is, if we talk in church, on the rock himself. And we've got to be disciplined enough and be humbled enough to know those convictions and stick with them no matter what. That's so important. That you're not changing with the wind. No, I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I know why I'm here. Therefore, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do with the time that I have to do that, living on this earth. Then there's being hopeful. We got to build for a better tomorrow. We ain't going to live forever. I said that already. That's one thing for sure. You will die. So what you going to do today? How are you going to build for the future? How are you going to help build this vision that others can buy into? Because the vision is not just yours, right? The vision is not just yours. Yeah, what Habakkuk says, or Habakkuk, however you want to pronounce his name, write the vision and make it plain. Without a vision, people will perish. Without a vision, the church will perish in this current climate that we are in. So we've got to grab a hold of the reins right now so that we can build for a better tomorrow. We have to be collaborative. You can't do it by yourself. And that's inside the church and outside of the church, right? Again, the church is a business. There's the business of discipleship, but then there's the business that you have to do with the finances and the budgets and all of the thing, the administration. Those are things that keep it going. And so you need partners for that, but you also need the partners for the discipleship piece too, because we can't be everywhere at all times. We are not omnipresent or omniscient. And then here's the challenge. As leaders, do we want to leave an inheritance or do we want to leave a legacy? You know, somebody dies and leaves you an inheritance, a couple $100,000, that can be spent relatively quickly. And if you've not invested it in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to get any return on it, it's gone. But when you leave a legacy, you're leaving something that's going to permanently transform the lives of others. How are we leaving a legacy in the church? The church, not the building, but the church, the people, because the people are the church. See, Jesus was a catalyst leader. Jesus came for change. Jesus didn't come for the status quo. And if Jesus didn't come for the status quo, why are we still sitting right there? Church is not a place we go. The church is who we are. Period. End of story.
Doctor. There was so much in that. I knew you would bring it, like there was so much in that. I'll start off with the question. If anyone else has a question, feel free to leave them in the comment section on Facebook, and I'll ask the question for you. And so the first question is, while you were going through the catalytic leadership, I think the first one was being called, know your calling. So how does one know their call, or how do they find that thing, their niche or the uniqueness about themselves that they can bring to whatever it is they're called to, whether it's pastoring or whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's being a parent? I mean, how do people find that thing that gives them the energy to continue through the good, through the bad? That uniqueness, I think, is the thing that helps them get there. But how do they find that?
So I would say it's about what is your relationship with a higher power, God, or whatever you deem to be your higher power. You have to have that relationship in order to get your eyes opened to see going back to that other question, who am I? And when asking that question, who am I, and asking the spirit, the higher power, to open you up to the possibilities of what it is that you're here for. And when you do that work, because it's a both and, when you do that part, then you will begin to get revelation as to what you're here for, or getting a direction of what your calling is. Whether your calling is teaching, preaching, being a nurse, whatever the calling is, whatever the call, because there's value in each of the calls.
Absolutely.
We are not all here to do the same thing, right? First, you don't want me doing your hair. No, you don't want me doing nobody's hair. You don't want me cutting it. You don't want me trying to braid it. That's not my gifting. There are some folks, my barber in particular, who I need to see, that gift that she has to do that, and does that with a passion, and does that with an openness and a love that you can feel it coming off of people. When you're really doing that thing that you're supposed to be doing, you you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. You don't worry about what you're getting paid for, because you're getting satisfied on a totally different level. And so you've got to be able to open yourself up to spirit, number one, in order to get that direction, and ask yourself those questions, and ask those questions of spirit as well. There's so many times that folks they wander in life because they're doing things that they think mama said I should be doing, or daddy said I should be doing, or so-and-so said, well, you look like you would be a good such and such. But what do you feel?
Right.
Your heart of hearts and in the deepest crevices of your being, what do you feel? A quick story. I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be an attorney. But my grades at undergrad in that first year, I was telling you earlier, because I was enjoying myself, they weren't that great. And my mother said to me, because I was a political science major, and she said to me, look, these grades and my money, we're having a problem. Therefore, what are you going to do with your life? Because if you don't get it together, you're going to be here at home. And I was like, I can't be here at home. I can't do that. She said, well, you need to major in something that you enjoy. And so I decided English was going to be my major. So, well, what you going to do with that? I said, well, I'm still going to go to law school. She said, yeah, what else? I said, I don't know, what else do you want? She said, you're going to be a teacher. You're going to get a teaching degree. You're going to have something to fall back on. And, it is funny now, but I've been falling back on it for 32 years because she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. But after I opened myself to the possibility of what she was saying, truly opening myself, I could feel that gifting that God had created in me in the first place.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, second question. Okay, so it's around the legacy and inheritance, because that was really deep. That was a heart jerker there. Many leaders, right, whether it's a business or churches, which we know churches, some they have the business side too, but entrepreneurship type or corporations, many thought they were leaving legacies, right, through having a building. We're talking about the church, but because of COVID-19, something, as you mentioned, none of us ever expected to have to deal with, especially now. Many of their buildings or businesses or churches, they'll close. So how do people know what determines as they're building if it's going to be an inheritance or if it's going to be legacy?
So the question becomes, if it's something that could be easily dismantled and destroyed, can you? Because a fire can take a building in a minute, right?
Wow.
If it's the thing, I think that's what I'm trying to get to. It's a thing that's man-made. That's an inheritance. That's the man-made thing. Okay, so you made money to pay for the insurance to leave for your kids. It's a thing. The legacy is that it's innate. It's that you can't put your finger on it. You can't say, I'm gonna build a legacy. You might be able to build it in another way through how you raise your children, how your relationships. But often when we say build, we're thinking about actually brick and mortar. And the inheritance, again, is that kind of tangible piece that you can put your hand on. And the legacy is the intangible to me. That can manifest itself in a tangible way.
Right.
It starts off, the seedling of the legacy starts off in an intangible input into somebody else. All right, so I'm putting into you love. I'm putting into you dedication. I'm putting into you loyalty. I'm putting into you leadership skills. I'm pouring into another person, and then that person takes those things and forms them. That becomes the legacy, because those, I can't take away that. And then if they do right, then they take that and pour it into the next person. Therefore, it continues to move from generation to generation to generation, versus the building that you built that either burnt down or termites got it, or it's just not sufficient anymore.
Amazing. Wow. Still. All right. And so Kimberly Adams asks, how can this training be adapted to the nonprofit world? Many nonprofit leaders want to be catalysts for change, but they tunnel vision on jumping for every grant or economic survival of the organization. Creativity and commitment suffers and nothing grows. So basically, again, the question is, how can this training be adapted to the nonprofit world about leadership?
Yeah, very easily. The principles of leadership run across the board. So it's not that it's just about churches. This is really a training for any organization in a time of change, or in the midst of where we are right now. And to speak a little more deeply about that, it's really about the vision. Folks run after the dollar, but what's the vision? There's got to be a larger vision for where those grant dollars are going to create something, right? To create something that could lead to a legacy, actually, in an organization. So it's really about leadership on a broader spectrum. I just focused it today on the organization of the church. But I teach this in my classes at the university. I teach catalytic leadership with my students, and they are across the board. They are nonprofit, for-profit, education, K-12, higher ed, social service agencies, business. It runs the gamut, because leadership is leadership, and so it's about getting the right people in the right seats on this bus.
Nice. All right. So if there aren't any other questions within Facebook, I've got one other question, right?
All right.
So those who ignite change are visionaries, and they're normally considered troublemakers by those who don't want to shift when there's a paradigm shift like what we're experiencing right now. So can you encourage or speak to the folks who wrestle with being the change agent or the catalyst for change, and they're really wrestling with opposition, whether it's internal or external?
Yeah. So that's a good question. That goes back to connecting to who you are and what your purpose is. Once you understand that, you a rabble rouser, you cause trouble, but you're causing trouble for a bigger purpose.
Yes.
Again, it's not about you. When you recognize that the change that you're doing, or the change that you're leading, the change that you're purporting, is not about you, but about the larger purpose, then you can move on for another day or so and do what you're supposed to do. Now, we're human beings, and so what happens is our feelings get hurt, or we get tired, or like I said to you earlier, don't come with me with no foolishness, because I'm not going to be biblical in what I'm going to say to you. That's just real talk. I mean, this is me all day long. Is this sometimes I'll be like, hey, not today.
Right.
But I'm human. And at the end of the day, I still have to look in this mirror and say, okay, so did you do right by God and by your purpose today? And if I didn't, then I just pray that the Lord will let me live one more day to try to get it right. Because it's really about trying to get it right every day. It's not about perfection. See, and change, there's nothing perfect about change. It's chaos.
Wow.
But it's something exciting about being in the midst of that when you know that you are walking in your purpose. And it's something that feeds you to keep moving on. Even though all around you, you see, oh, man, there's craziness going on. But you know that you are doing what thus saith the Lord to you. And when you do that and know that you have a relationship with your higher power, then you can deal with that. You can deal with the naysayers. You can, not suggesting that it's not hard.
Right.
But how about this? I'd rather be a disappointment to you any day.
Yes.
I will not actively be a disappointment to God. Not actively. I will be obedient to what the Lord is telling me to do. Even on some of them days when I'm like, look, man, I'll feel like that today. And then the Lord will give me a minute and then come back and say, okay, are you ready now? Are you ready? I have something for you to do. And only you can do this.
Yeah.
So it's really about knowing yourself and getting grounded in your relationship with God. Again, another avenue of this is this whole notion of spirituality, which I left out of the discussion today. But that's it. When are you sitting down and having time with nature? Understanding that you're a small piece in this large thing. So it's really about knowing yourself.
Awesome. I'm full, and I'm gonna watch this probably 50 times just to catch all of what you shared. Yeah, it's been amazing. I appreciate you once again for, giving your knowledge and your wisdom, even, and I know these things come through, experience also. So your transparency, your transparency is amazing. And so thank you again. I'm gonna check the group one other time for any other questions or comments. And so we appreciate it. We appreciate it at Sister Reach. We thank you for your time, and for those, thank you for those who have taken the time to join us here. Thank you for listening to us, for your time, also. And so again, I'm full, Rev. I'm gonna watch this a few times, and again, we at Sister Reach, we appreciate you, and all that you've done, and we're gonna be reaching out in the future, because every time, you hit the bullet, you hit the target, and you don't miss, and then you hit the target that I hadn't even put up for you. So, so we're blessed. We're blessed by your presence every time you're here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's always good to be able to share. I don't take it lightly. I don't take the gifting lightly. I don't take where what God has deposited into me. And to do what I do. It is but for the grace of God that I sit here and I'm able to do this. And I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for this moment to be able to share what God has given me. Because I do feel like I know I'm walking in my purpose. I'm walking in my purpose. So yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And until next month, for our June preacher series, Lord, this time is fine. Until our June preacher series, we will see you all then. Tune in and be on the lookout for the flyer for our next month's speaker.